Hi, this is Aaron with Vanishing Cabinets, and in this video I'm going to be building this miter saw station, so stay tuned. Alright, so I finally finished building this miter saw station, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. And if you knew me, that's about as excited as I ever get about anything. Overall, it took me about 2 months to build, working on the weekends on and off, and from a difficulty level, I'd say it's about an intermediate level project. As far as the materials I used to build this, I'm going to put them here. So when I'm not moonlighting as a woodworker, I am an accountant by trade, so I love getting into the numbers. So here's a breakdown of all the costs for the specific materials for this project. And I must admit, the first time I saw the cost of that Craig stop block system, my reaction was, "What?" But I decided to bite the bullet and give it a shot, and at the end of this video I'll talk about my thoughts on this product. And so the total cost for this project was $1,230 excluding any cost of tools. So just for some background, this is my old miter saw, which has that really long sliding rail, which makes it pretty unrealistic to be part of a miter station against a wall because of how wide the cabinet would have to be. So I upgraded to this Bosch dual bevel miter saw, which has a much smaller footprint. So for about the past year, this has been my miter saw station, with the saw placed on top of my childhood heirloom office desk. And there's a little room for improvement here, so let's get into it. So as the subtitle indicates, I'm going to be cutting out toe kick platforms, which is different than notching out toe kicks in the cabinet boxes. I'm going to be creating separate platforms where the boxes will be sitting on. I like the platforms a little more because for me it's easier to get them level with the uneven garage floor. So because you're not going to see these platforms, I'm going to build them out of some cheaper lower grade plywood. So this is CDX plywood, and I'm ripping down about half a sheet and assembling them with pocket holes and glue. Later in the video I'm going to go through how I end up covering these up so it matches the rest of the cabinetry. So the most important thing with these toe kick platforms is making sure that they're level. So I am cutting out shims from 2x4 and using a couple levels to make sure I'm level in both directions. And then I'm going to nail and glue on those shims once they're in place. So as far as these cabinet boxes, I actually built these as part of another video where I was testing out different kinds of joinery and different tools. So I'm not actually going to cover that in this video, but if you want to watch that video, I will leave a link in the description. So I'm just going to secure these cabinets in place by attaching them to each other, then driving in a couple 4-inch screws into the studs, and then a couple screws from the box into the platforms. Next step was to add a couple 2x4s connecting the two cabinet box sections, and these 2x4s will be the support for a platform where the actual miter saw will sit. I probably could have done something more creative here, maybe put a drawer or some kind of storage, but at the time I really just wanted something solid. But I do come up with something later in the video that I think dresses it up nicely. Next I needed to add some height to the cabinet boxes to account for the height of the miter saw. So I'm adding about 3 inches to each side so that the countertop will be close to flush with the top of the miter saw. And I'm just making these out of plywood, and I'm going to be attaching them with some glue and pocket holes. In hindsight, I think I could have just cut the side panels out taller and attached the 2x4s about 3 inches down, but we like to do things the hard way here. So this is how I was envisioning the cabinet boxes to come together. So I was going to have 4 drawers along that top skinny section on the raised platform, and then on each side of the miter saw I was going to have 3 drawers and 1 open section. So for the wood of the face frames, I'm going to go with the always readily available Select Pine, which I got from Home Depot, because I'm too scared to go to hardwood stores and have them chastise me for not knowing enough about wood. I mean, the guys at the hardwood store are pretty cool, but I always get the suspicion that they're secretly judging me. Just like the people at Guitar Center. For those guitar players out there, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. I mean, I've been playing guitar basically my whole life, and every time I go in there and have a conversation with them, they make me feel like I've never touched a guitar or ever bought a piece of gear. But I digress. I'm assembling these frames using my Festool domino, which I should mention isn't necessary for a project like this. If I didn't have the domino, I'd probably just use pocket holes on the back sides of these so you don't see them, and making sure I clamp the hell out of them so they don't move as I drive in the screws. And for these small little pieces, I just notched out a couple small grooves for them to sit in. So I built 2 identical frames here, one for each side of the miter station. And after the glue dried, I just hit it up with some 120 grit sandpaper. So for the drawer boxes, I'm going to be making those out of 1/2-inch plywood. I'm going to be ripping down the strips on my table saw and cutting down the boards to their final length on the miter saw. Yeah, I figured this out eventually. So my plan was to assemble these drawer boxes using rabbet joints, so I wanted to cut those using my newly purchased dado stack here. So for each drawer, I'm going to be taking 2 of the boards and rabbeting both ends, and the 2 other boards are going to be sitting within those rabbets. Also, as far as technique here, I definitely should have had a sacrificial fence to butt the board up against because my rabbets ended up coming out pretty inconsistent. I also here am just cutting out a little dado groove that the bottom panels can be sitting in. And speaking of the drawer bottoms, I'm going to be cutting those out of 1/4-inch plywood. To this day, I don't even know what happened here. I set the fence to a certain thickness and I ran the sheet through, and by the end it was about 1/2 inch shorter than where I set the fence at, thereby rendering most of that sheet completely useless. If you have a theory on how that happened, I'd love to hear it. But anyway, here I am assembling the drawers using those rabbet joints for 2 of the boards and putting the other longer boards within those rabbets, and then adding some glue and brad nails to hold everything together. And then the final step, I add in the 1/4-inch bottom piece and then glue and nail in the last board. This is my first time trying to build the drawer boxes this way, and it didn't go bad, but I will say I've had better luck and better results using pocket holes, just I think where my skill level is at right now. But that's really where I have the most fun with this hobby, is trying different techniques and learning and getting just better at the craft. So at this point, I think the drawer boxes came together pretty nice, so I went ahead and assembled the rest for a total of 10. This one hurt, so I made every single drawer about 1 inch too long because I didn't account for the width of the drawer slides. So I had to hammer them all apart and then just clean them up and reassembled all of them. But perseverance is key. But after I got all the drawers reassembled in their new size, it was finally time to mount them into the cabinet boxes. So as far as mounting the drawer slides in the box, I am mounting them to a 1/2-inch spacer, which in this case I'm just using a cut of MDF. And the spacer is really only here so that the drawer won't hit the face frame when moving in and out. To get consistent heights for the drawer slides, I use these Craig drawer mount jigs, which are actually pretty helpful. So these cabinet drawers are going to be inset, so
I don't know what I'm doing.
what that means is the drawer fronts are actually going to be flush with the face frame versus sitting on top of it. So when I mount these drawers in here, I just need to make sure that the front edge of the drawer boxes are flush to the edge of the cabinet boxes.
As flush as I can. As flush as one can.
So if you've ever seen my other videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of black, usually as a trim or accent color, but in this case I'm just going to go nuts and make the whole miter station black. It's not going to be in the interior of the house, it's going to be in my shop where I can do whatever the hell I want. Sorry, that outburst wasn't directed at you. I'm married. So to attach the face frames to the cabinet boxes, I am just drilling out some pocket holes here and just going to hold it in place while I drive the screws in. I also have this middle section of the frame that's going to join up the 2 side cabinets, and I'm just joining it to the 2 face frames of those cabinets with some dominoes. And as I mentioned earlier, I wanted these toe kick platforms to blend into the rest of the cabinet box, so I'm just adding a piece of 1/4-inch plywood here, stained black as well, to cover those up. And I'm also going to be adding a 1/4-inch plywood backing in that middle section and a couple small pieces of baseboard trim. Alright, so these are the drawer fronts that I'm going to be mounting, and these were a project in and of themselves. So to keep this video at a somewhat manageable length, I ended up making a separate video specifically just for those drawer fronts. So I will leave a link to that video in the description, so please check that one out. But here's the 15-second version. And if you've been enjoying the video so far, please consider liking and or subscribing to the channel. I put a ton of effort into these videos and it goes a long way in driving the algorithm and helping me grow the channel, so really appreciate it. But now back to the miter station build. So I'm finishing everything off with some lacquer. This is a gloss lacquer and I'm doing 3 coats, spraying the face frames, the inside of the drawers, pretty much everything I can spray, including the walls and the floor, unfortunately. So since these are going to be inset drawer fronts, I'm going to be spacing out my drawer fronts relative to that face frame. So I'm using these little 1/8 inch spacers around all sides of the drawer, and then with those in place, drilling out the holes for the hardware and then securing those drawer fronts to the drawer boxes with the drawer hardware.
Wow.
For the doors, I'm just using these little 1/8 inch wood shims to mount them in place initially. I'm just going to add some door stops in here.
I'm just using these little triangles that I cut out. Okay. So that bottom of the door is catching. I'm going to push out the bottom part this way. Yeah. That's pretty close. I'm just going to move the hinges forward this way so it's flush with this outside frame. There we go.
So for the countertops, I've elected to use 3/4 inch MDF board, and I'm just breaking down the larger sheets with my track saw. And the advantage of a track saw is the precision that you get using that track. You can use a straight edge and a circular saw, although there's just some risk of the straight edge moving around on you or the saw not sliding as nicely as a track saw does. And the challenge with a table saw is you have to lift those big heavy boards onto the table saw and keep it straight as you push it through, which is pretty challenging. Okay, so I've seen a lot of other videos out there where other builders are making their countertops sometimes with 2 full sheets of 3/4 inch plywood or 3/4 inch MDF, or even flipping 2x4s on it and making a full 3.5 inch countertop. And my legitimate question here is, how necessary is that? Because this one sheet of 3/4 inch MDF feels super solid.
Dude.
So am I underbuilding them, or are other people overbuilding them, or is there some major piece here I'm missing? Are they getting used differently by other people? Do people just prefer the thicker look of the countertop? But let me know in the comments your thoughts on this, because I've never had a problem with just one sheet, but I want to hear if other people have had different experiences. This black stuff I'm adding to the top of the countertops is basically just wallpaper. It adds a little bit of protection, but it's almost exclusively aesthetic. The recent trend appears to be adding a sheet of laminate to the top of the countertops, which seems to add some good durability there. I didn't do that because I'm lazy. So I'm adding on some edge banding and some trim around the edges, all out of just pine, stained to that same color that I stained the drawer fronts.
Alright.
So I intentionally had the 2 cabinets on either side of the miter saw just slightly higher than the height of the miter saw. That way I can just add shims under the base of the miter saw to lift it up and make it flush with those countertops. So to measure these shims, I laid a board flat on the miter saw and butted it up against the countertop, and then marked a reference line at the height of the countertop, and then just ripped along that reference line, which was just the remaining height needed to get the miter saw flush with the countertop. So the miter saw station is going to have a dedicated shop vac here for just the miter saw, just because of how far it's going to be from the dust extractor. And if you haven't seen one of these vacuum switches before, they are amazing. Basically, you plug in your tool and the vacuum into that switch, and anytime the tool draws power, it flips on the vacuum.
Dude, every time.
And then anytime you stop drawing power, it will automatically switch off the vacuum. Also added on this aftermarket dust collection chute made specifically for this Bosch miter saw, created by Shop Nation, which does a fantastic job.
Jesus. Look at this miter saw station right here. How can I compete with that? Dang. That's blue. That is huge. Alright.
So after doing some research, I eventually landed on this Craig stop block system, which checked all the boxes for me as far as what I was looking for. So in the package, you get all the track you need, as well as the measuring tape, and then 2 separate stop blocks, one for each side of the track. Now I see a lot of people building their own stop blocks, which I think is great, and if I had more ability, I probably would do the same, but I didn't really want to take any chances. And Craig is generally a pretty pricey brand in my opinion, but every time I do buy one of their things, it always is high quality and I never end up regretting it. But initial thoughts on this, I mean, this thing is solid. Like, it's got really good weight to it, and the stop blocks slide up and down the fence really smoothly, and they lock into place pretty much instantly, and they're not going anywhere when you butt up a board against it. If I had one complaint, it's that you're kind of locked into having that fixed fence on the miter saw station, so you lose some of the countertop space. But beyond that, I'm very impressed. I really like this pivot feature where you can lift it up and out of the way if you don't want to use it. And both stop blocks are really smooth along the track. After I got them dialed in, I just wanted to test it, so I'm setting it to 18 inches here. I want to highlight on this clip just how good this dust collection is with that aftermarket dust chute and the shop vac on there. And it's dead on. So this past Christmas, my wife bought me a branding tool with my logo on it to brand my builds. I thought this would be the perfect cherry on top to christen this build.
Ah, damn. Looks like shit. What the f?
Alright, as it turns out, I had to practice with this thing just a little bit. So I just made a block to sit in that gap, and now it looks perfect. And then I got a little crazy and added it in a couple more spots. But hey, what are you gonna do? Alright, that's gonna do it for this video. If you like this kind of content, please like the video. And if you think I've earned it, please also consider subscribing to the channel. And I will see you on the next one. Oh wait, there was just one last thing that I had to do.